Let me tell you a story, one that you might not have heard before. This story is about a family and a house. About honor and accolades, yes, and also about community and country. It's a story about one family that extends outwards, whose impacts ripple through our islands like a wave and outwards further, to England, to Canada, to India. This is a story that transcends time. Its bends touching history, flowing through the present and into the future. This story might not be my own, might not be yours either, but it definitely is about us, who we are as a people, based on our history and culture and not the lies we've been fed. This is a story about the Capildeo family and the Lion House, otherwise known as Anand Bhavan or the Mansion of Bliss. Alright, so I can answer this question upfront in like an easy to understand, quick, efficient takeaway kind of way, or I can take you on an adventure. I choose the latter. Let's go meet the Capildeo family and see where it takes us. In full transparency though, I'm coming to this topic from a place of severe, embarrassing ignorance. The Capildeos are an Indo-Trinbagonian family, and although we hate to admit it, many Trinbagonians are still steeped in that kind of colonial mindset that looks at Indo-Trinbagonians as second-class citizens, who many of us don't need to know about. And so we don't learn too much about them outside of the holidays their arrival and culture celebrate. There's a violence here, which we'll talk about more throughout the video. This has been an eye-opening learning journey for me. I hope it's one for you too. One final disclaimer. Too often in our discourse about race and ethnicity in Trinidad and Tobago, we engage in a sort of conversation dead-end strategy where the moment someone voices a struggle their community is going through, we have people crawling out of the woodwork to invalidate them, saying nonsense like, "You just need to shut up. My ancestors had it worse." That is a disgusting, inhuman response I refuse to accept as normal. Yes, our ancestors did have different, terrible experiences, but their suffering should not be used to diminish other people's suffering, in the same way that racism should not be used as a trump card against sexism. If seriously examining the pain and history of a fellow Trinbagonian is not something you're capable of, you can leave now. My best friend from secondary school, Brandon Ramkisoon, is the one doing all of the amazing artwork for this video, so please check out his stuff. That will be linked in the description. Brandon, give us a quick introduction.
Hey everyone, my name is Brandon and I'm an artist and engineer originally from Trinidad. Usually, my art is inspired by my environment and the picturesque landscapes of my travels to illustrate these colorscapes in my own creative point of view. So today, I will be your artist carrying you on this creative and historical journey while pushing my own boundaries in the world of art and my abilities as I know them so far. So sit back and enjoy the experience that my art can bring you in this historical telling of the Capildeo family.
Alright, let's start our journey into the history of the Capildeo family with the man and woman who made this all happen. Capildeo and Soogee Capildeo. Capildeo to Trinidad the same way many East Indians did, during indentureship. As a quick refresher,
On the 16th of February 1845, a ship known as the Fatel Razak departed Calcutta, India, carrying the first Indian immigrants to the mysterious land of Trinidad and Tobago. The first name which appeared on the ship's register was that of a 20-year-old male called Bharat. The name Bharat is also the Hindi name for the Republic of India. Bharat and others embarked on this journey to work as indentured laborers in the British colony of Trinidad, where slavery had recently been abolished. The arrival was eagerly awaited by the colonists, who believed these new workers could save the island from depression and ruin. After 96 days aboard the Fatel Razak, the first 227 Indian immigrants docked in the Gulf of Paria, bringing with them a whole new culture and way of life. This day, the 30th of May 1845, would come to be known in the future as Indian Arrival Day. Over 143,000 Indians came to Trinidad and Tobago to work as indentured laborers in the years spanning 1845 to 1917. Each individual was granted a 5-year contract, upon completion of which they were given a choice: a gift of 10 acres of land or returning home to India.
that's the simple story. But now let's go a bit deeper and really begin to appreciate how and why Indian indentured laborers came to Trinidad and Tobago. The impetus to migrate was a direct consequence of oppressive living conditions. Over 50% of the indentured laborers who came to Trinidad between 1874 and 1917 came from Uttar Pradesh. The contracts were misleading. They made no mention of the immigration laws that the recruit would be subject to once domiciled in Trinidad, likened to a penal code, providing for corporal punishment of the disobedient Indian indentured laborer. The planters relied on the fact that once on the soil of Trinidad, the Indians would be subject to colonial law and jurisdiction. So wool was pulled over the eyes of the indentured laborer. There was no need to mention the harsh immigration laws in the contract. Had the immigrants known the truth, many of them would have been deterred from migration. The journey was perilous and arduous. The monotony of such a long voyage was only punctuated by homesickness, disease, and the occasional suicide. Opportunities for leisure and exercise were minimal. Ramesar quotes an immigrant who sailed in 1884 who stated that on evenings it was the custom in good weather to assemble on deck or in the dormitory below and participate in group singing with sitar and tabla. Occasionally, dancing, singing, wrestling, and stick fighting were allowed until 8 p.m. Upon arrival in Trinidad, the immigrant was lodged at the depot in Nelson Island, one of the 5 tiny islets near coastal Port of Spain, the capital. The immigrant could be kept at Nelson Island for up to 6 weeks, depending on the demand of the planters for labor. It was only when beginning life on the estate that the vast majority of immigrants realized the trickery of the recruiter. Estate labor was hard and pay was low. Laws formulated by the government and the planters guaranteed maximum production at minimum cost. The planters arranged for the indentureship of many more laborers than was necessary. The result was that during harvest time, wages could be kept low as there was a surplus of laborers. Cane farming by nature is seasonal, and during the slow season when the crop was growing, there was a paucity of work for the Indian laborers. The result was underemployment, destitution, vagrancy, and frustration. Indentureship was in no way easy or fair, but as we'll see in Capildeo's story, it did offer the possibility of prosperity in a new land. Now let's actually meet Capildeo and Soogee and understand the strange land they found themselves in. Capildeo, eventually known as Pundit Capildeo, was born in 1873 in his family village of Mahadeva Dubey in the district of Somra, county of Gorakhpur, in the state of Uttar Pradesh in east-central India. In 1894, Pundit Capildeo left his home and went to the city of Benares to study. There he was recruited by Arcatius to work in the cane fields of Trinidad. On the 7th of August 1894, he was registered at the sub-depot at Benares, and on the 25th of September 1984, he sailed on the good ship Hereford from Calcutta with 597 other indentured immigrants. Capil was now committed by contract and by immigrant laws to a life of rough physical labor that caused illness and even death of some of the immigrants due to the onerous demands placed upon them. Capil's desires for education and wealth were dashed to bits by the cruel reality of working in an animal pen without companion or guide in a country whose people he did not know under a system of enforced labor. However, Capil's dreams were not entirely shattered, nor beyond fulfillment as he would have believed. He was chosen, perhaps because of his high caste and education, to be freed from this life of despair and degradation. Chosen by the Bengali Siddhar Gobinda as a suitable match for his 15-year-old daughter, Soogee. Capil and Soogee were married and set up shop on the site which today is the home of the Lion House. One must not underestimate the abilities of Capil's wife Soogee. In a different time, Gobinda would have been able to leave the shop in her capable hands. For soon after her marriage to Capil, she began to run the shop when not bearing children. Capil, set free of such burdens, dutifully followed the vocation of his father and ancestors. He began to practice as a pundit. Capil ministered to the Hindus of Shogunas and the neighboring villages. Short and stout, pious and resolute, Capil soon earned for himself the title of Pundit of Shogunas. The education and public position of a pundit would have made him a spiritual leader, one who provided consolation and support amid so much strife. Capil performed puja, both privately and publicly, giving readings from the sacred texts and so kept the Hindus spiritually close to the Hindu India they had left far behind. Capil's prominence secured his participation in the Panchayat that was convened biannually to formulate an opinion on religious and political matters. The Indians in Trinidad at this time were without leaders, and so the pundits, as educated men, deemed it their responsibility to give an opinion on matters that affected the Indian population. That was Capil's first involvement in political decision-making. It set a precedent for his sons to follow, for they both would become politicians who dared to threaten the status quo. Capil's family thrived as the mantle of success descended upon Capil's shoulders. Soogee and Capil had 14 children together, of which 9 girls and 2 boys survived. Financial success enabled Capil in 1924 to 1926 to build the Lion House as a shop and residence for his family. Capil at that time would have been unaware of the contribution he was making to the architectural heritage of Trinidad and Tobago. Yet Capil remained close to his home in India. He returned 4 times to his homeland of India with the aid of his newfound wealth. His 4th visit, however, after the completion of the Lion House in 1926, was his last. In 1926, at the age of 53, Capil succumbed to a mysterious stomach illness, leaving behind his wife and young children to mourn for him. The irony of his death is that Capil never got to live in the building for which he became famous. Alright, so as usual with these videos, we'll get what is commonly available online and then get sources from songs, Caribbean literature, and our elders. I am honored to introduce the elder who has been providing me with so much knowledge for this video, Ravi ji.
So my name is Ravindra Nath Maharaj. And everybody, I grew up being called Robin. And yes.
Oh.
Why? It's very interesting. My Aja, my grandfather, who came from India as an indentured laborer.
Yes.
He was still alive when I was small. So he was from a villager. He could not say Ravindra. So he has to put a vowel before. So he said, and he skipped the R. So he said Abin.
Abin, nice.
Abin. In the village, they were strange to Indian Bhojpuri. And in school, I went to Kaparo RC school, it was primary school.
Yes.
There they started to call me Robin.
Robin.
And instead of Rabindranath, they wrote Rabindranath.
Okay, nice.
But that also is the kind of manifest idea of the vassalhood of my civilization to live an ordinary life without being tortured at every. And I mean tortured not in a dramatic sense of Kerry, but and not even willingly tortured. It is very much natural in the shape of their society that these things will happen. But nonetheless, it happened, and as a student of history and my community, these things I'm concerned by because it affects us in different ways.
Ravindranath Maharaj, otherwise known as Ravi Ji, is the founder of the Hindu Prachar Kendra, a lifelong activist, community worker, and pundit.
Now, in the village on Sundays, we have Sunday morning service like a church. So people come to do puja on Sunday, and the pundit sees about that, and they do lecture and all of that. And I wasn't too much into the doing puja. No, all of them being there in the family, I had some background and so on. But now, and having gone to secondary school, I could have read these things. So therefore, on Sundays now, the pundit who was there, he was glad to be relieved. He built it, because he will go by his what we call shishya on weekends, because the religion turned out to be a weekend religion. Our holy days being Thursday and everything in the Vasa, what I'm talking about, calendar. So everything, the whole of the religion turned out to be a Sunday religion like Catholics. It's, very slowly, I started to take over this Sunday morning service. So I was coming official and getting more serious. And I think my friends now started to respect me. Some of them started to come to this Sunday morning service. They were drinkers. Some were not. And all of that. And we made a team and they would help and all of that. But in the evening, they'll be drunk. And so I was kind of pundit and there with my drunk friends sometime. And it was kind of crazy. So what happened then, I got very serious about it and started to, it was something generic to my birth and all of that, and I got serious about it.
Raviji has spent a decade plus in Kashi, India, where he became steeped into the scholarship of Hinduism and Indian culture.
And I stayed there in the ancient city of Kashi. That city is the center of Hindu spiritual life, and it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita also.
Wow.
So it's a very, very great town in our tradition to go for pilgrimage and learning. It's a place of learning. So that's where I spent 10 years mostly there.
Yeah. What part of India is that, Raviji? Is that north, south?
No, that's north.
Yeah.
And that's along the Ganga River, the Ganges River.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I lived just 5 minutes from the Ganga. I live about 4 places in Benares, and it's always about just 5-6 minutes from Ganga.
Upon returning to Trinidad to do some research, he realized that the Hindu Indo-Trinbagonian community here was in need of support, and so abandoned his research and spent the last few decades of his life uplifting his community.
When I came here, I found the community had lost quite a lot in those 10 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And I, while doing my research and all of that, a phrase that came up was very sad. For much of the elders who would do my work, who will do my work? That's the work.
Yeah.
Who will do what it referred to.
Like who's
when
gonna
a Hindu
carry
dies,
on? Yeah.
when a Hindu dies, we continue every year at a certain period called Pitri Paksh. And that Pitri Paksh, for that fortnight, we make offerings for several of our ancestors, three generations of our ancestors. And he had come from India, and he was more tied to that culture than we were tied. My Aja. So my Aja friends in that age group, they would be having that fear because some children convert, some children don't know, some children don't like to this ancestor worship and all of that. And
Again,
these people work hard and they buy lands, and out of that lands, 3-4 generations are living, but they wouldn't think about this need that they have because they don't believe.
Again,
and all of that. That's
that goes back to that same violence.
Yes.
The culture basically disconnecting them from heritage, from family.
So that disconnect, as you call it, the disconnect, I started to see that.
Yeah.
And I dropped my research.
Yes, and something needs to be done about this.
Yes, and I formed an organization, started to train young people.
Yes.
And the organization is, we have 5 acres of land. We have a big building for Mandir, and right now we're building a 3-story building for heritage work alone.
Wow. He established the Hindu Prachar Kendra in 1995 as a community space to share cultural knowledge, and has fought for the continued dignity of Trinbagonian people as a community worker and activist. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to Raviji, learning about his life and his work and his connection to the Capildeos. Even within the scraps of history we have easy access to, there are often gaps. One such large and glaring gap in this family's history is the integral role that women played. So much of the Capildeo's success rests on the shoulders of these unsung heroines. Let's start with what we know about Soogee from online. In the late 40s, Soogee Capildeo, the widow of Pundit Capildeo and now matriarch of the clan, moved out of the Lion House, first to an estate in Pitti Valley and then to Louis Street, Woodbrook, so that her children and grandchildren could be educated in Port of Spain. And here's what Raviji had to say about the role of women in his own family growing up.
So, my mother used to stay home. And of course, I and my brother would stay home. Or I was a little bigger, I would probably be behind them, get a chance to go with them and so on. And my grandmother, she would be working also in the field. And sometimes she would come home earlier or whatever. She was a very strong woman also, so stout. But still, she would cook. For my grandfather.
Raviji also commented on the larger role of women within Hindu society.
And the most important thing is that the woman is the one who do the most service to the community, not the men. And that's a sad thing in the Hindu community, that it's the women who upkeep the mandirs, who upkeep the home. And most of the president is men.
Of the actual like mandirs and
yes. And that's why when in my training, when I was training people, I noticed there was a girl and she was just the best in everything. And I drop it on them, and she's the head. I drop it on her. I mean, I made her the president. There were people who grumbled because she, now as the head, had the responsibility to sit down on what we call the Singhasan, the seat from which we preach. And it was the first time a woman was doing that.
Wow.
So they grumbled about that. And so I think the grumbling, it was safer to be on that than to lead because the girl was just very good.
Yes.
And nobody in the classes where I run the training, I think I was upset.
Yeah.
No boys were, because she just stand out to everything and she has the ability to just step several things at the same time.
Wow, that is amazing.
Community building is basically women.
Yep.
And in any case, the first instrument of building not community but civilization is the home.
Yes.
And it's the women who are devoted. But if the both of them, husband and wife, is teachers, she's still doing everything. No?
Yep.
Look, I do one thing home. Only, hardly anything. I don't even work for money. I only do community work. So all the expenses my wife bears it.
On the note of his wife, we can see the similarities in his relationship to his wife and that of Pundit Capildeo and Soogee. Both women's hard work and humility allowed their husbands to become pillars of the community, unmarred by the demands of traditional work.
The day I got married, yeah, it was on a Sunday. We all get married only on Sundays in Trinidad, and I had started working already with community, training young people, and I had camp. And the camp was starting that same Sunday. I was married. So I told my wife, we'll have to get married 5 o'clock in the morning. Because we have to invite people and all of that. And she's right here, making faces. And so we got married about 5
I want to know what she
o'clock
thought of this.
No, by that time, people were telling her, you're married a crazy man. So, she comes from a big family, the Syrian family. And she has given me full time to do community work, which I still do.
There's also more to be found about the women and the type of roles they might have played through the words of one of the famous grandsons of the Capildeo house, Vidya Suraj Prasad Naipaul, V.S. Naipaul, in his book A House for Mr. Biswas, which I recently finished reading and is said to be based on some of the things V.S. Naipaul experienced in the Lion House. He writes, for example, about Mrs. Tulsi, a stand-in for Soogee Capildeo. "This is what a mother has to put up with," Mrs. Tulsi said. "I don't mind. I've lived long enough to know that you can't expect anything from anybody. I give you $500. Do you think I want you to bow and scrape and touch my feet whenever you see me? No. I expect you to spit on me. I expect that. When you want $500 again, you come back to me. Do you want me to say, the last time I gave you $500, you spat on me. Therefore, I can't give you $500 this time. Do you want me to say that? No. I expect the people who spit on me to come to me again. I have a soft heart. And when you have a soft heart, you have a soft heart. Your father used to say to me, my bride. That was the way he would call me until the day he died. My bride, he used to say. You have the softest heart of any person I know. Be careful with that soft heart. People will take advantage of that soft heart and trample on it. And I used to say, when you have a soft heart, you have a soft heart. The role women have played in our shared histories in Trinidad and Tobago should never be understated. Women have historically worked just as hard as men in the fields, classrooms, and offices, while also carrying the added burden of being in charge of all the household affairs, rearing of children, and maintenance of familial and cultural traditions. Both Raviji's recollections and Vidya's writings serve to remind us of this reality that we see around us every single day. Pundit Capildeo and Soogee had 9 daughters and 2 sons who lived to adulthood. Tossed largely into the gap of history is the fate of those 9 daughters, whose contributions often turn up only in stories passed but not written down within the community. The 2 sons, however, Simbhoonath and Rudranath, given the spotlight patriarchal culture and history shone upon them, we know a lot about. Here's what we know about the first son, Simbhoonath Capildeo. Capildeo was one of the founding members of the Democratic Labour Party and a member of Parliament from 1956 to 1966, becoming known as the Lion of the Legislative Council.
I hope to put the case for the sugar worker before the country, and I think I succeeded in that, because I remember one particular incident when Sir Harold Robinson was speaking. All I got up and said was, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, whatever Sir Harold says, just bear in mind that I am saying the opposite things." And I sat down, because he is for the sugar barons and I am for the sugar workers, and I sat down. That was my speech. It's anti-Robinson at that time. Mind you, I used to work for the Robinsons in the sugar estate. I used to weigh canes a little while, and I saw what happened to the Indian laborers, Indian cane farmers, and it was really something grueling for them to have to sell 1 ton of cane to that farm.
Pundit Capildeo died on a trip to India in 1926, leaving Simbhoonath in the role of family patriarch at the age of 12. His mother, Soogee Capildeo, guided him, but Simbhoonath was also an autodidact. Capildeo studied Hindustani and Sanskrit and became a local expert on Hinduism, and he also explored the philosophies of Western civilization. He rapidly assumed intellectual leadership of the local Hindu society, and in 1928 began creating the modern formal structure of Hindu society in Trinidad and Tobago. He was also the Secretary General of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, preceding Satnarayan Maraj. But that's just the beginning. Let's really dive into who this giant of a man was. Author of his biography, Simbhoonath Capildeo, Lion of the Legislative Council, father of Hindu nationalism in Trinidad and Tobago, Darius Figuera, writes, Simbhoonath was, in his day, the single intellectual genius of Hindu Trinidad. He laid the foundation of the most powerful Hindu organization in the history of Trinidad and simultaneously prepared the way for the political evolution of the Hindu politician.
I like to feel that I was one of the parents of the Mahasabha. In 1950, I was in England for a short while. I had an interview with Mr. Krishna Menon, and by his inspiration, I came back home to Trinidad to find that the Hindu community had been split up into 5 groups. The Hindu Board of Control, the Hindu Association, they have Kabir Panthi, the Arya Samaj, and the Sunarayan Panth. But in those days, the non-Hindu power divided the Hindu community permanently into 5 incorporated bodies, which meant that, having regard to the tendency of the Hindu, they could bring no coagulation again. But a number of people, namely people like Ramsurat Singh and Rampasad, Hiral Rampasad and so on, a number of people of us got together and decided that this is nonsense, that we are now big enough to take care of our own affairs. And we decided to merge the Board of Control and the Association, so that the people in certain areas who never saw a school for generations, I could tell you in 1952, I checked out a village in Pinal, and there were several homes, one after the other, in the rice field, because the houses were built inside the rice field. There were several homes inside the rice field where the children had not gone to school for 4 generations. The father had come from India, the son, his son, his son, his son. They had not gone to school for 4 generations. I came and pointed that out to the Minister of Education, the Director of Education, Mr. Morland Hopkins in those days. He sat down and he himself carried out a survey, and then he called me and said, I was then on the board, the Mahasabha board. He said, you have permission now to build 6 schools in that area. Go and choose the locations and find out where you'll put the schools. And that's how 6 of those schools were built at that time.
Figueroa writes, quoting Simbhoonath, Mr. Speaker, I want to make this clear that the Hindus of this country have been betrayed for far too long and used as pawns in the game of politics. I say that the fate of a country and a nation depends upon the efforts the people make themselves. And as a Hindu, I say that I will not rest until I see the situation changed, and until I see every Hindu has in this country equal rights with everybody else. Because this is my country. I was born here. If I have to fight for any country, it is this one I have to fight for. And if I have to die for any country, it is this country I have to die for. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
I'm talking about the time when no Hindu could become a headmaster unless he went and baptized himself to be a Christian. You had to be baptized to get a job. The Canadian missions gave all the jobs. And if you went there and said, I want a job to teach, are you a Hindu? Yes, no job for you. You had to baptize, you had to become a Christian, then you get a job. And we found that irksome, irritated. Some of us who were concerned about the Hindu community found that very, very hard to bear. And we fought it.
When I asked Raviji about Simbhoonath, he gave me significant insight into his life. However, he also revealed to me a character who I could not believe I had never heard about before.
The politician really who emerged, it is only about 4 or 5 main persons who is high up, starting for Bhadese Sagan Maraj and Capildeo. And actually, you're making a mistake there, that the Capildeo was not the main person in the Indian politics at the beginning. Bhadese Sagan Maraj. He was a wrestler too. He was a Brahmin, and he grew up in a place in Caroni, and they had some family dispute, and I think out of that he was the elder brother. He had to fight for his brothers, and he became a fighter himself. But as he grew up and he started to work, he started work by digging sand by the river. And so he managed to buy a truck. And when the Yankees had come down to Port of Spain side, and they needed some support of local trucks and so on, he got a job there. When they left, he bought a lot of board and galvanized and these things. But he was also already being seen as a strong man in the Hindu community.
In the late 60s and early 70s, one could not help, if one had been a journalist covering the political beat, one could not help not to know Bhadese Sagan Maraj. The thing is, he was a towering 6-footer. He was a millionaire from the age of 30, you know, when he bought a lot of stuff from the American base. And he had a presence in Parliament, both in Parliament and in the general society, in the sense that he was the founder of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. He was also the President General of the All Trinidad Sugar Estates and Factory Workers Trade Union. And he had founded the People's Democratic Party, and I think it was somewhere in 1950, which he eventually merged into the Democratic Labour Party.
So what he did, he took those board and galvanized and all these things and started to build small buildings in Caroni and Chagonas and Elsie Corroy and Pinal and all of this, and turned them to primary schools.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
That was a big revolution.
Yeah. That's amazing.
You know?
He was always willing to provide education. He said, and I quote, for the Indians, who were the only group disenfranchised of a denominational education, because you had the Canadian mission, you have just started the Muslim schools, the Arya Samaja schools, and his phenomenal approach to this was outstanding because, if I recall correctly, within the years of 1952 to 1953, he built something like 32 schools.
He had the money. He was the only Hindu with money. And he had the surplus material from the American bases. And he used the money and the surplus material not only to build houses for himself, but also to build schools across the country.
That is it's a big thing in the community. Mm-hmm. And Bhadese with that schools, Mahasabha with those schools, that no matter what Bhadese is, we could never don't thank him for that.
Yeah.
Because if you had depended on the government to build schools in those areas, it would never. It didn't even take care of Lavendale.
Mm-hmm.
I remembered him from the early days when he had his first march of Indian independence in 1947, when I was just a wee bit of a kid. And I remember him leading a group of pundits walking through my street in Curep prior to a big celebration in August, I think, 1947. And that march formed the basis or the catalyst of what today is the Sanatan Dharam Mahasabha.
You see, Bhadese is the person who started Mahasabha.
He is the person who started.
Yes. Simbhoonath Capildeo he was a solicitor. He was the
solicitor.
Yes, so he is the person who was with Bhadese and 2 or 3 other persons. But the mover of the whole thing is Bhadese Sagan Maraj.
While the population of East Indians, 1/3 in Trinidad, we haven't got a single representative on the Public Service Commission. It might be argued that the Public Service Commission is not a racial body. But that is more the reason why they should have an Indian in.
The early days in the sugar workers, when there was fragmentation in various groups for leadership of the sugar workers, and he was the first guy who went out and brought the sugar workers together for what was then the All Trinidad Estate Workers, Sugar Workers Union.
Bhadese Maraj called a strike of sugar workers in those early days. A sugar worker couldn't afford to miss 1 week's pay, and he called a strike. But he said that he personally will give every worker $5 per week to remain on strike. And from his own pocket, he ran a strike for 5 weeks, paying the sugar workers to stay away from the industry.
Bhadese also fought elections. And he had a party called PDP, People's Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. That is before the LP.
Yeah.
That PDP was a party that he fought and he won. He fought in Trinidad on the federation election and he won.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gomes and all of these people were in that election in different parties and all of that.
Wow.
And like I said, there was a sort of mutual respect between himself and Dr. Williams, because Dr. Williams knew of the clout he had in the Hindu community. It was a serious political advantage because, I mean, it's a large community, you know, and Bhadese was able to control that and bring that control as representative in the House in the Houses of Parliament, in that you had to respect the man, and you had to respect what he said, you had to respect what positions he took, whether you agreed with them or not, because of the large constituency he represented.
The formation of the Democratic Labour Party was quite a historic event in Trinidad, because out of that party reincarnated other parties. So after that party came, I think it was the Democratic Labour Party, and following that it was the United Labour Front, ULF, and after that I think the other opposition party became the current party, the UNC, which is led by Bhadese Sagan. So that was not the only accomplishment of Bhadese, but I would say that in 1958, he did a wonderful job in defeating, for the first time, the PNM in the first and last federal election. And therefore, that was one of the strengths he posed in his political career. So I think that was really, really a man who had, or who you could describe as an astute leader.
Bhadese made a lot of enemy in the Hindu community too. And their children have been educated in the same schools, you know. But they will carry it for generations. It's a stupid thing, but so.
He would come into Parliament. At that time, I was a political reporter for the Express. John Barr was a political reporter for the Guardian. And there were just two of us, I think, on the press table. And Bhadese would come in and slam down 2 pearl-handled revolvers, you know, beautiful-looking weapons, you know. And he'd say, oh, have this, you know. But we would stay away from you know, touching the thing, you know. And he said, that's for them fellas across it, meaning Jamada and them. And, I mean, every Friday evening, this was the kind of drama. And he would actually challenge 1 or 2 of them, especially John Barath, who was the representative for St. Augustine, Dr. John Barath, a dentist. He would challenge him to fight. Come downstairs, and John Barath would make sure that he leaves a little before the session ended, you know. So it was real drama in Parliament. I mean, the Parliament today and the Parliament then, there's no comparison. You know, when Friday came around, you wanted to be there.
I was shocked to learn about Bhadese, a man whose name I had never heard before, but whose actions have had an immeasurable effect on our lives here in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's even more. This article, Spotlight on Indian Leadership, a Bhadese Sagan Maraj retrospective, argues that, contrary to popular belief, the first large political party in Trinidad and Tobago was formed by Bhadese himself in 1953, and not by Dr. Eric Williams, who formed the PNM in 1956. In 1953, Bhadese Maraj shook the political landscape when he merged with the other independents, all of whom were Indians, as well as 1 other Indian member of the legislative, to form the People's Democratic Party. The PDP was therefore the first real attempt at party politics. In the lead-up to the 1956 first party general elections, historians often levy the accusation of stoking racial tensions at Bhadese Maraj. They argued that his actions and comments during this time altered the course of our country's political trajectory permanently. Later, the Consul General sought to identify those responsible for intensifying racial tensions in 1955. Certain East Indians, including the Indian Commissioner Bhadese Maraj and the editor of The Observer, must bear a large share of the responsibility. For in seeking to strengthen East Indian sentiment and solidarity, they have aroused the deep-seated distrust of the Indian among Negroes and whites alike, who, incidentally, are not aware of the rate of population growth of the Indian element. While some have dismissed these accusations as bad faith and levied only by powers aligned with colonialism, Bhadese's actions were also not seen too favorably by anti-colonial Indo-Trinbagonian scholars like Figuera either. The colonial overlord would have been forced to either end the path to full internal self-government, thence independence under PNM hegemony, or bend to the wishes of the electorate and install a government of national unity in 1956, with the foremost promoter of national unity elected to the Legislative Council in 1956 being Simbhoonath Capildeo. The karmic reverberations of Bhadese Sagan Maraj's act of self-immolation changed the history of Trinbago irrevocably from 1956 to 2002. For Afro and Indo hegemonists are now locked in a battle for state power. Bhadese's actions gave room, vent, space to a political system and more so governance premised upon racist hegemony and the winner takes all. Bhadese must therefore stand before the bar of Trinbagonian history, charged and convicted as the perpetrator of the most potent blow against the promise and possibility of a sustainable democratic Trinbagonian social order free of racist hegemony. The general elections of 1956 stand therefore as the watershed in the history of race relations and the political and constitutional development of Trinbago. While Bhadese recovered from that loss and miscalculation, our country's political landscape is still reeling from the fracture of politics along racial lines that historians argue Bhadese stoked, and was continued by subsequent political parties. Even Dr. Eric Williams, ahistorically remembered as mild-mannered and uncontroversial, engaged in the escalating ethnic division. After losing to the PNM in 1956, the PDP merged with Albert Gomes to form the Democratic Labour Party. The DLP defeated the PNM in the 1958 federal election, winning 6 seats out of 10. It was this defeat that saw Eric Williams launch perhaps his most vile attack. Not only did he accuse the DLP of fighting the election based on race and even stealing the election, but the infamous hostile and recalcitrant minority statement lives on to this day. Here's what Ravi G had to say about the history of Bhadese and Williams.
Before Williams came, the election wasn't so divided because it was more the white people and the others.
So there was at least some unity in the
So it Bhadese was a big Indian Hindu who was already in the election during even to the time of the Federation.
Yes.
And Williams came then, I think after the Federation, I can't remember. And there the African Indian became separated.
He was an enormous presence on the political scene, and he commanded that presence in the Hindu, among the Hindu population.
He was a genuine person, always there for people.
He always believed that the power of the mind, the power of the brain has greater force than any other power in the world. And he wanted the children to develop the brain power.
Bhadese Maraj, in my opinion, has made a significant contribution in so many facets to Trinidad life that his contributions will live on based on what he has laid and which is still carried out in the life of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, so we had these two men, Simbhoonath and Bhadese, both instrumental in their representation of Hindu Indo-Trinbagonians in the political scene. While these men were certainly similar in their resolve, our history certainly treats them differently. Simbhoonath and his brother Rudnarat get remembered as earnest politicians, while Bhadese's legacy, tainted by allegations of intimidation, violence, and igniting the flame of ethnocentric politics, is never mentioned, and thus collectively forgotten. That is an injustice that annoys both Raviji and I similarly.
That is the other thing. Simbhoonath Capildeo come in, make us push out Bhadese. So that period there was a period of kind of a childish longing for a big man with brains, not with heart.
While Bhadese was certainly a force to be reckoned with and should be remembered as such, Simbhoonath was clearly no mild-mannered bystander. It is Simbhoonath Capildeo who insisted that he wished he could burn every sugar estate in Trinidad to effect the liberation of the persons so trapped on the sugar plantations. It was Simbhoonath Capildeo who called for civil disobedience to resist the electoral changes put in place by the PNM, especially the changes in electoral registration, the electoral boundaries, and the voting machines.
You have to go back to the time when there was no adult suffrage. We had to fight to become eligible to vote because the first adult suffrage constitution program that came out was that you could only vote if you could read and write English. And that would have disenfranchised a large number of the community. So we began a battle to get the right to vote from that time.
Both of these men fought hard for their community and made lasting contributions to the history of our Twin Island Republic. When we don't call their names and share the stories of their contributions, we fall closer towards the Trinidad and Tobago author Charles Kingsley wrote about in At Last, where he wrote, "Trinidad ought to have been a happy place, if it be true that happy is the people who have no history." Figuera, continuing that train of thought, asks, are we really happy? Do we have a sense of history? Or are we transients condemned to repeat history because we ignore history?
Three groups of people. The first people, who I think has priority over me, that they are so small, all of that.
Yeah.
They are in a worse condition. And we who they brought, and the African slaves who brought, and have now to suffer a second type of moving away under independence and singing anthem together, stand up very, very straight, as if that's going to make things all right.
On that note of the dangers of erasing history, as early as our independence in 1962, we hear in songs like Independence Calypso by Lord Bryner, the Calypso monarch of that year, advocacy for an ahistorical view of the country and its people, blissfully devoid of historical ties, grievances, or prejudices.
Conscientiously and constitutionally, forget all this lousy rumor about racial equality. If you are an East Indian and you want to be an African, just shave your head clean like me, then they can't prove your nationality, because this is your land, just as well as my land. This is your place, and also it's my place. So let me put our heads together and live like one happy family. Democratically, educationally, we live independently.
And while this may have been the earnest belief of some, the desire to pretend inequality and feelings of disenfranchisement didn't exist, did nothing to address them. Even more well-known songs like David Rudder's The Ganges and the Nile or Brother Marvin's Jahaji Bai, both songs I adore, all speak to this collective sweeping under the rug of the feelings of disunity between Afro and Indo-Trinbagonians.
The Indians had the same issue, that they lost their land and lost their traditions and lost their language. Same thing with the African, but Indians can't see that. and
And
the
the same
Africans
thing with the
are saying
first
that.
people too. And I
Yes.
guess the
well,
connecting. Oh, go ahead, Ravi.
the first people don't count at all.
That's what. That's.
You know something? I just feel I could hold the Prime Minister head and shake it and just point out to these people. You just have a handful of them and we don't shame. We have no damn shame. Indians looking out for themselves, Africans looking out for themselves. The politicians are different tribe. And we have no shame. Every community here has a particular malady. The malady came from a disease called brutality.
Yep.
One. And that was sown into civilizational losses. So the brutality and the loss of civilization, you leave the human being almost an animal.
Now, let's get contemporary. Let's couple this historically unaddressed disunity between the Indo and Afro-Trinbagonians with 45 plus years of political dominance by the predominantly Afro-Trinidadian, historically colonially aligned People's National Movement. The reality of our current political climate, viewed through this lens, begins to make a lot more sense. If you just erase the history of the people, how you go? Like, what are you going to be other than vassals of the colonizer?
No. You see, this question you asking is the most important question that independence should have been received. What are the ingredients?
Yep.
So
we can't just pretend like we have no history. Yeah.
We disconnect from colonialism, but adopted coloniality.
Yep. I like
you
how
know,
you put that.
and then and then in the schools you confirm and affirm the coloniality by making it the way we have to understand.
And then I think on top of that, there's also a lack of teaching any sort of history, of historical.
Yes.
We pretend as if we started in independence, and suddenly we's a new people who came from nowhere, who did nothing before that, who have no history, and it's frustrating. I'm no historical or political expert, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and a healthy heaping of skepticism. Here's my take though. I am in no way a fan of Kamala Persad-Bissessar, her style of governance, her administration's rampant use of AI, analytics, consultants, false promises and lies to maintain the appearance of competency when it's clearer day by day that competency never even entered the front door. But I can understand why her and the UNC being in power represents for so many Indo-Trinbagonians and other Trinbagonians who felt invisible and disenfranchised by the political system, an opportunity to finally be recognized, to have their anger be heard and their legitimacy as people deserving of respect acknowledged. Because for too long, we in Trinidad and Tobago have kept Indo-Trinbagonians, poor Trinbagonians, rural Trinbagonians, Trinbagonians with little formal education, we've kept them as second-class citizens and at an arm's length from political power, normalizing a type of cultural violence and oppression against them by maintaining and reinforcing the discrimination the colonial powers practice on all of us during their prime.
We have been vassalized. Our language.
Yeah.
An important thing as ancestral ritual, which is Pitri. Pitri meaning forefathers has gelled into the word work. And looking at the ritual as work.
Yeah, I wonder how.
You know, and then that affect the younger generation when they start to look at it as work is a job. It's not something that ancestral, something that you spiritual, something that it's part of your obligation. So the whole ritual conceptually has been tortured.
Yeah, and
Down
again,
the
turned
line
into this.
and received by your generation in a tortured way. No wonder we start to look at it as pagan and we ourselves start to say it's pagan. And what both angers me and angers me and gets me worked up, disappointed with politicians is that are they so dunce not to see this, or are they worse, know it but don't want to attend to it? Because if we are the result of colonialism and we got independence, which is to free us from the colonialism, how come we are not attending to these things?
As evidence of this, we can go back to my acknowledgement at the top of this video of how little about Indo-Trinbagonian culture I know and have to know to navigate any system in the country. Or we can look at how little we talk about men like Bhadese or Simbhoonath or Ravi.
I am seeing the African is really the white man there.
That's the other thing, because
and the Africans see me as the white man there. We hate the white man.
So now we have Kamala practicing politics in a way so many of us Afro-Trinbagonians, middle and upper class Trinbagonians, urban Trinbagonians, Trinbagonians with plenty formal education, find distasteful. What I believe we're failing to recognize is that this disrespect to political systems that many Trinbagonians hold dear is the point. Because many of their supporters don't care about the system that doesn't care about them.
When we start to forge a nation, right?
Yeah.
And what we try to do, and it's a way to forge a nation in a Western way. It means that, and that's what you see what Brian, you raising up there.
Yep. Yeah.
We all are one people, and there's people, but oneness don't necessarily mean that you have to destroy differences.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and that same attitude that we bring with independence, as if it is we have been, they're playing us music and we just the notes, and we behave in that way, that to be a democratic country, we can have difference, and that is the damn thing that caused us not to be able to find a way together, to be together, and be different at the same time. Accept the differences and all of that, because we so think that to be democratic, we have to be one. What is the quality of this one? Where the oneness is, how does it deal with the differences?
The government then is signifying to a people who felt invisible that they are there, they are seen, and the politics that had no time for them, shrouded in respectability and filled with academic language and terminology, that many Trinbagonians ignored the violence and inbuilt inequality in, is not the politics of today. The government's supporters never truly felt included in the project that is Trinidad and Tobago. And so why should they care if the country runs out of money, or sells its sovereignty to the US, or distances itself from CARICOM? Because if I was never invited to the table, who cares if they don't have enough food to share, or a leg falling off and somebody teeth the spoons? I wasn't eating anyway. So certainly not me. While probably not so dramatic, that feeling of disenfranchisement is real and something that both Bhadese and Simbhoonath called out decades ago and fought to avoid.
So we Indian vote Indian and African vote African. That is the kind of
that's the system, the political system.
Yes. So Africans, PNM ruled the country for so long.
45
and from the beginning time.
Years. Yeah.
Yeah, from the beginning time. And the man who was ruling, why he was voted because he was a doctor. And he couldn't see that this thing needed treated, forget for Indian, but for the African people.
Simbhoonath is quoted as saying the following: "If the Premier would only give his instinct for history some rein, and if he would put the case honestly and truthfully, he would say that the Indians have been discriminated against from the very first day that they came into this territory until today. And it is that point of view which the Indian Association seeks to put forward. It is that point of view which, if you disregard when you become independent, you are sowing the seeds for civil war in this country. We believe now that the race prejudice that they have been victims of is now being put into reverse, and those who were the victims of the past are now the aggressors at the present time. The second-rate citizens are the Indians of this territory who are being made the victims of their prejudice."
Colonialism has given us a double whammy. One is the colonialism, and the second is the coloniality, which is a new type of system.
Yep.
Because they still have the baton in the hand and they orchestrating the music.
Yeah. Our current government's performance featuring guest artists' disrespect, lies, and accusations is just that. A performance. Kamala has been in politics for years and knows her way around the respectability dance better than most living politicians. She acts the way she does now because she knows that it will be received favorably by those formerly disenfranchised, even if it means widening the gap between ethnic groups and destabilizing the country. I think that she's willing to dance to whatever tune keeps her in power. I asked Ravi whether the communities he finds himself a part of are actually benefiting from the government's actions.
I find that we have to, as a people, understand the game that politicians play, whatever the color. And no, we are not going to get any good structured development through that.
There's a hurt that is not being acknowledged. There are large parts of our population feeling disempowered and unrepresented since the inception of our country. There are Hindu Indo-Trinbagonians that people like Bhadese and Simbhoonath and Soogee and Pundit Capildeo and Ravi fought for, who are, to this day, treated as second-class citizens. And then there are other ethnic and religious minorities that have it even worse. And if we don't deal with it, and first acknowledge the inherent inequity in our current political system, how can we move forward?
Yeah, and it does demonstrate how much we have been mishandled, but blaming that ain't gonna help.
Yeah, it's not.
We have to treat our own malady.
Yep. This quote from the article about Pundit Capildeo's life, talking about the history of Trinidad and Tobago, sums my concerns up perfectly. For Trinidadians are people who do not have a regard for their past. They are content to exist in the present, indifferent to the memories of those who came before them. When Trinidadians speak of their ancestry, they do so in the most vague and general ways, and their main purpose is usually to stir up ethnic or political sentiment. Alright, that was a lot. Let's take a break. We're officially doing a two-parter. Woo! I'm tired. and we still have a lot to cover. There's still several more members of the Capildeo family whose history I want to explore. We also need to look at the significance of the century-old Anand Bhavan and what's happening with it today. In part 2, we'll go past a simple diagnosis of the problem into the realm of what we can actually do about it. I'm tired. And I feel like you'd be tired after all this history talk and an academic political pontificating I've been doing. See you in the next few weeks for part 2. Peace.